It was a scene that touched every emotion: anger, frustration, heartbreak. The scene of Mayflower moving vans packing up a legendary football franchise and driving it out I-70 in the dark of night to a city called Indianapolis. The dastardly demise of the Baltimore Colts was indeed the top story of the year in our area, a story whose final chapter has really not yet been written. It was a story born of denials at stormy Robert Ursay press conferences in January at BWI Airport.
I have not any intention of moving the goddamn team. If I did, I will tell you about it, okay?
It evolved almost daily for several months, with Indianapolis becoming the focus of attention as Ursay and his henchman, Michael Chernoff, met continuously with the mayor and other officials there, trying to put together a deal to move the team to the Midwest. Everyone waited for the final word to come at NFL meetings in Chicago and in Hawaii, but there was no announcement. Meanwhile, the state of Maryland worked feverishly to concoct its own deal to satisfy the Colts and keep them in Maryland. But then, suddenly, on a cold and snowy March night, the end came for the franchise that spawned Unitas, Moore, Berry, Amici, Donovan, Matty, and others. The Colts drove away.
Trucks were out there, but I think that's the final humiliation of the city.
Pro football was gone, but as it turned out, just for a little while, as the city pressed all of its legal buttons to get the Colts back, USFL Philadelphia Stars entered the picture. That league's champions decided to move to Maryland, first to College Park in 1985, then to Memorial Stadium in 1986. The deal came in November with owner Miles Tannenbaum.
We're here today to formally announce the renaming of our franchise as the Baltimore Stars and the return to Baltimore of the winning tradition of years gone by.
Sports stories seemed to dominate the news in Baltimore in '84. Another era ended the day Jim Palmer hung up his spikes for the Orioles in an emotional farewell at the stadium.
I'm going to leave. Thank you very much for coming.
And emotion reigned again in a happier moment when the Baltimore Blast brought the Major Indoor Soccer League crown to town with a victory over St. Louis at the Civic Center. Three Marylanders brought gold back to Maryland from the Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, most prominent swimmer Teresa Andrews of Annapolis. No gold, but plenty of green for Deloise Singletary, the first person to strike it rich in the state's new lotto game. She won $5 million, and News Scene 2 cameras were there exclusively when she got the incredible news.
It would appear, based on what we can see, that your ticket has an annuity value of about $5.5 million.
Messy.
Another big winner in '84, Helen DeLuch Bentley, who in her third try did what had been politically impossible. She defeated incumbent 2nd District Congressman Clarence Long in a tight race.
Oh, I don't feel any bitterness. I've always said that anybody could beat me with all the years of work I've put into my district and the things I've done. I take my hat off to them. Mrs. Bentley has beaten me, and I take my hat off to her.
I'll take his hat. I'll add it to my collection.
She will be sworn in January 3rd in Washington. Clarence Long says he's just going to relax for a while. Political history was made again in Maryland election night when this traditionally Democratic state voted Republican, lifting President Reagan to a victory over Walter Mondale. Two people who made national and local history for decades left us in 1984. Civil rights leader Clarence Mitchell Jr. died, his funeral bringing Vice President George Bush and the three major Democratic presidential candidates to Baltimore. The man who left a legacy of freedom was remembered.
But we knew him. We, his family, knew him. And you, his friends and compatriots, knew this man, and therefore you loved him.
Then, just 2 months later, the leaders of Maryland's Roman Catholics passed away after a long illness. Lawrence Cardinal Sheehan, his funeral at the Cathedral of Mary, our Queen.
In some respects, the secret to Cardinal Sheehan's long and extraordinary ministry is linked to some remarkable personal qualities he had. Among those was a deep sense of humility, which enabled him not only to accept his own limitations, but also to recognize his need to rely on others.
Then there was the fall tragedy in Dundalk when 3 Baltimore County firemen died in a furniture store blaze. It was the first time in 30 years that Baltimore County firemen died battling a fire. Their massive funeral procession wound for miles along Baltimore's interstate highways to a final resting place in Lutherville.
It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. And so there is a sense of brotherhood. For instance, when we go on a emergency response or something of that nature, we have to depend on each other.
And it was the year that the killing of a prison guard at the Maryland Penitentiary, Herman Tolson, launched a major, long-overdue state investigation of conditions in the pen. The prison's dangerous south wing was called a troubled place in a troubled institution, and the probe cost the warden and assistant warden their jobs. The state's prison system will be a major focus in the upcoming Maryland General Assembly session. The General Assembly had its hands full last session over the controversial auto emissions testing system that began in Maryland in February. There were snafus and calls by lawmakers that the entire system be scrapped. But the program survived and the tailpipe testing goes on.
The city's Office of Promotion and Tourism is billing it as New Year's Eve nostalgia. For $6 a person, you can hear the music of 4 decades, ranging from bebop to the Beatles. There will be plenty of music, desserts, and non-alcoholic beverages.
We're looking for family-type people to come and join us this evening. The moms and the dads to dress up in their bebop outfits and the poodle skirt.